Good morning, everybody. Very, very warm welcome to everyone that's joining us here today. My name is Neelam Sahota. I'm the CEO of Diversity Community Resources Society and have the distinct pleasure of being the moderator for today's session of Diverse Talks. Before we begin this morning, I'd like to advise that I'm joining in today from the ancestral, traditional, and stolen lands of the Samiamu, Katzie, Coquitlam, Kwantlen, Kikite, Musqueam, and Tsawwassen First Nations. The knowledge, traditions, and ongoing contributions of these communities are significant in providing context to the work we do at Diversity Community Resources Society in building truly inclusive and strong communities. We pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. This recognition of the history of the land we make at the beginning of our meetings only opens the doors towards decolonizing practices, reconciliation, or bridging awareness into action. A land recognition is not an endpoint in the journey of reconciliation. It's actions which create true conditions for reconciliation and create a foundation for restoring, renewing, or developing a new relationship with Indigenous peoples. As individual members of our communities, I ask each of us to consider how we are creating conditions for true reconciliation in our daily lives. Let this question resonate with you so that merely recognizing the land this morning does not absolve you from putting action into these words. This is a commitment and challenge we hold with truth in the work we do at Diversity. And we need a collective community that holds these commitments in our hearts and minds daily in order to meaningfully foster relations and speak truth to power. So good morning again to everyone. While we've held events and presentations like this at Diversity before for staff and the community, for 2022, we have decided to do them a little bit more intentionally and frequently under the new banner of Diverse Talks, Conversations for Change. We need meaningful connection today more than ever. This series of talks will help us amplify different perspectives and ignite conversations on issues important to our diverse community in Canada. We held our first event 2 weeks ago for Black History Month. Now we're happy to follow with a focus on today's International Women's Day session. We'd like to begin with a traditional part of our tradition at Diversity with respect to International Women's Day, and that is with making a donation to an organization whose mandate is to further women's equality and gender parity. We began this tradition back in 2016 with a donation to Surrey Women's Centre, which was our inaugural year, followed with Jeremy's Foundation the year after, West Coast Leaf Fund, and the Shakti Society for Women's Empowerment and NISA Helpline last year. This year's donation is a total of $1,000, with $500 of it being sponsored by our allies and supporters, Pacific Community Resources Society. This year's recipient of the donation is Pacific Association of First Nations Women. This is an association that envisions a matriarchal community where all Indigenous women in BC are safe and respected with a sense of belonging and connection to cultural traditions. I would like to invite the co-sponsor of this donation, Debbie Anderson-Ng, CEO of Pacific Community Resources Society, to say a few words about their sponsorship. Welcome, Debbie.
Thank you so much, Neelam, and good morning, everyone. It's my absolute pleasure to be joining in the Diverse Talks event today in recognition of International Women's Day and to acknowledge and celebrate the contributions not only of our distinguished panelists, but also of all the women who continue to advocate for equity in the workplace and in other settings throughout the community. So on behalf of Pacific Community Resources Society, I'd like to thank you, Neelam, and Diversity for welcoming our participation in the event again this year. We are honored to match your contribution to the Pacific Association of First Nations Women in support of the wonderful work that they do with Indigenous women, youth, and families in our communities. I also just want to take a moment to acknowledge that women around the world have been deeply affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, which has heightened the large and small inequities, both at work and at home, that women face every day, and especially for women caring for children at home. They have experienced negative impacts to their work, setbacks to career advancement, and increased stress and burnout. As organizational leaders, we will need to understand the impacts on our colleagues and be flexible in how we support our staff to continue to engage at work while maintaining wellness for themselves and their families. I'm really looking forward to hearing from the amazing women on the panel today, and I have no doubt that you have inspiring stories to share about your passion and perseverance in your journeys that led you to becoming the esteemed and celebrated leaders joining us today. So thank you so very, very much for having us.
Thank you again for Debbie and the team at Pacific Community Resources Society for, again, a second year in being a strong supporter of this event. I'm a true believer that meaningful change only happens when you engage and bring people in, and we're deeply appreciative of our community efforts and collaborative efforts as community organizations here in Surrey. So thank you again. I'd now like to call upon Diana Day, lead matriarch of Pacific Association of First Nations Women, to say a few words about the association. Diana. Oh, you're just on mute there, Diana.
Of course I'm on mute. Good morning, everyone. I'd just like to acknowledge the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people whose lands I'm been so honored to live in and work and play on since the early 80s. I've been out here, and I'm from the Oneida Nation. I'm a Haudenosaunee woman from Wolf Clan. I'm a Wolf Clan member and very thankful to be here on these lands and to be leading the Pacific Association of First Nations Women. So we changed our name. We were once the Professional Native Women's Association, and we started in 1981. With a handful of women who were working within government, some Native women who were working in government and wanted to create a network for themselves so that they could support each other while they're in the workplace. So that's how we started in 81. And I was a member of the association in the 90s, and I was actually the president of the association when we changed our name to the current name. We changed our name the time the AFN changed their name, AFN. We wanted to be AFN with a W. And so we said Pacific Association of First Nations Women. So that's how you can remember our acronym, PAFNW. And if you can check out our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram as well too. We're doing lots of exciting things. Very thankful for this donation that you've given to us, and very thankful that I've been with the association for 5 years now, and raising the profile of the association. We have a lot of interesting programs going on and things happening. So I want to mention that we have an Indigenous Women's Council that we're working with. So we have Indigenous women who are working in different organizations and really wanting to pull our women together to see if we can have get all that energy together, and we're more better strength in numbers. So really wanting to ensure that our women are lifted up in their associations wherever they are, because we have a lot of our women are working in mainstream organizations as well too. So it's really important to be supporting those women who are working in mainstream organizations. Sometimes they're the only ones in those mainstream organizations. So it's really important to be supporting our women. So the Professional Native Women's Association was created in 81 to do that. And we've just updated our vision and our mission a few years ago. So thank you for reading that out. We do envision a matriarchal community in BC where all Indigenous women are safe and respected and protected. And unfortunately, that's not the case for many of our women. Many of our women are facing a lot of violence, and it could be partner violence, but there's also murdered and missing women as well too. So we have a young woman by the name of Chelsea Porman who is missing from Granville Street and Drake, right downtown Vancouver. So how can someone go disappearing from there? Just thinking about how the police did mess up that case, and how the Pacific Association were able to support Chelsea's mom and to get a complaint against the Vancouver police for their negligence in that case. So, you know, had they acted more quickly and swiftly as they do with other people, you know, Chelsea might have been found sooner than now. We might know what happened to her. So anyway, there's a lot of need that we have. So we have this Indigenous Women's Council. So we're wanting to create some unity and some strength with our women, and to look at outcomes and for the calls for justice and the TRC and those kinds of things, and really make sure that we're having these calls being implemented and being worked on. So those are some of the things that we're doing here. We also have a Vancouver Indigenous Community Response Network that's looking at elder abuse and prevention for that, because that's so important. We're doing some work with the COVID response now too, so we're able to provide some good food boxes for our families. And we have a big Cree Ojibwe program too for our Cree Ojibwe people who are away from home. So learning Cree Ojibwe, we have over 300 students in that program. And we also have a drum circle. So I lead a drum circle. We meet every Tuesday night, and we have women from, it started out in person. We were meeting in person here at our location on Dundas Street. And then when COVID hit, we had to go online. And since we've gone online, we've reached a large number of women from all across Turtle Island. So we have women joining us on a weekly basis from different parts of the States, and also from different parts of Canada as well too. So we're very thankful for that. We have a home care services as well. We've been doing a lot of work with kids in care for many, many years. Our Joy Chalmers, she started our home care business for us. Unfortunately, she went to the spirit world last June, but her work continues, and we're doing lots of work with kids in care. And we have some different programs that are supporting them as well too. We have Urban Butterflies and mentoring Indigenous youth. And then we have a Mentor Me program for kids that have aged out of care. We're doing lots of cultural teachings as well too that we have, and our women are the priority for our cultural teachings, that we're wanting to make sure that our women receive those teachings first and foremost. And one of the other things that we have is a program called Champions Against Racism. So that's something that we're wanting all allies to get involved with, our Champions Against Racism. We're going to be doing training for allies on First Nations people, and also on how to become a better ally, what it means to be an ally. And one of the things to be an ally is amplifying Indigenous voices. So I'm very thankful for diversity, for amplifying Indigenous voices today. It's really important that we have Indigenous voice out there. Yeah, there's a lot of work to do. We need a lot of allies out there to support us, because we can't be everywhere. And we know that we have a lot of allies out there, and we want to bring them together and to provide them with support and training so that they can become better allies for Indigenous people. So if you can check out our Facebook page and also our website, I've put a link in the chat there. Have a look there, and you can join the association. We always looking for members. We're looking for also for people to join our Champions Against Racism, so that we can create an army of allies. Yeah, which is so important. So very thankful for this donation and for connecting and making connections. And I hope that you can all join our Facebook page and our website, and look at some of the things that we have and how you can become involved. And there's donations. There's a donation page on there as well too for folks. So thank you so much for being good allies and for being here today. Now I'll go.
Thank you so much, Diana, for again sharing with us a little bit about the great work that's being done, of course, at the Pacific Association of First Nations Women, and an invitation for those that are on the call here today about ways that they can be involved, get better educated as well too. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day. And again, we are honored to be making this donation this year in recognition of International Women's Day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, so we are now moving into our panel discussion for today. And the discussion topic is women leading in the new normal to break the bias. And so before I introduce our incredible lineup of panelists today, I'd like to acknowledge and welcome some of the other women leaders here today, including Diversity's very own board members, Jane Shin, Sonia Parmar, Amy Gill, whose leadership, support, and guidance I am deeply appreciative of, and which enables me to lead knowing there is a community of support. So thank you very much to Jane, Sonia, and Amy for joining us here today. Of course, we also have additional board members who are also supporters and allies of women leaders in our communities. Apkar Singh Tatley, who is our board chair, also joins us here today. I'd like to also welcome and honor City of Surrey Councillor Linda Annis, who has joined us here for today's discussion, as well as a good friend and colleague, Patrick McKenzie, CEO of the Immigrant Employment Council of BC. I also apologize to all of our guest members. It's a deeply impersonal way to meet and know everyone that's on the screen. All I see is about 3 screens full of names. And so I deeply apologize if I've missed anyone here today, but this is to please extending again my warm welcome and thanks for joining us today in today's conversations. So I have the distinct pleasure of introducing each of our amazing panelists. And I will begin with MLA Rachna Singh, who is our event partner for today's Diverse Talks. Rajna Singh is MLA for Surrey Green Timber since May 2017 and Parliamentary Secretary on Anti-Racism Initiatives. Rachna moved from India to Canada in 2001 to build a better life for her young family. She has worked as a drug and alcohol counselor, a support worker for women facing domestic violence, and a community activist before entering politics. Our second panelist is Trish Mandewo, who is a Coquitlam City Councillor and an accomplished serial entrepreneur and diversity and inclusion strategist. As founder of Synergy on Boards Consulting Group, she helps BIPOC people be board ready. She was awarded as one of the top 25 Canadian immigrants of 2017. Next, we have Sobhana Jaya-Madhavan, is Associate VP, External Relations, Simon Fraser University. After immigrating to Canada in 1995, she built a career with the government of BC as a child welfare worker and senior manager for nearly 2 decades. In 2015, she was appointed as the first executive director of BC's Provincial Office of Domestic Violence before joining SFU in 2017. And rounding out our panelist team is Robin Gill, Vice President with Talk Shop Media, a national media relations company. Prior to that, Robin was a journalist for 27 years, most recently as a national anchor and correspondent for Global National. A very, very warm welcome to our absolutely esteemed panelists here today. And I, again, have the distinct pleasure of being the moderator. So I've got a tough task in front of me today. I'll ask each of our moderators, of course, when you're ready to answer, to jump in, is just to unmute yourselves. We'll spotlight you through this time period. And we're really trying to work through this as a conversation. And I'll perhaps what I'll do is I'll lead into some of the questions, knowing that I know either I've had the distinct pleasure of seeing you, witnessing you in various situations, and also knowing a little bit about your background as well too. So I'll start off with again, we'll kickstart our conversation here with MLA Rachna Singh. So Rachna Singh, what specific actions do you take to help break the bias that women face?
Thank you so much, Neelam. First of all, I really want to appreciate you taking the lead and becoming co-host in this event. I was really hoping that we could do this in person, but hopefully last time virtually. But thank you so much for this opportunity. So honored to be joining you all from the territories of the Lekwungen speaking people, the Songhees and Eskimo First Nations. And Neelam, it is the question that you have asked. I have like so many thoughts coming to my mind. Like as racialized women, what do we do? Like I think we break barriers every day. Where we have come today, it has been because of the support of close allies, strong allies, and it is so good to see so many of them on screen today. And I think the position of privilege that I have, Neelam, it is very important that I give back to the community that what I have been able to achieve. It does not stop here. There are a lot of glass ceilings that need to be broken. And in my role, especially as in my role of the Parliamentary Secretary for Anti-Racism, we know that women are disproportionately impacted, especially what we have seen during pandemic. It has been tough on women. Stats Canada has also given us data on that. But it has disproportionately impacted Indigenous, Black, racialized, non-binary women, even in much more deeper, and the impact has been so great for so many of them. So so glad to be in this role.
Team smiles. So what we do is we have our widest smiles, and hopefully you have a screenshot of a full screen of smile.
The legislation that we are bringing, the anti-racism data legislation, that will throw like a lot of things we know, that how women are being disproportionately impacted when they access services, but we don't have the clear data. We don't have the clear light on that. And it is very important. A lot of times, a lot of policy work is not done because we get it from the establishment that we don't have the data. So I think the data is the key, and bringing the anti-racism data legislation, I think it would be a great step in bringing the equity that is much needed, that has been women of color, the community allies have been asking for far too long. So glad to be doing that important role.
Great, thank you so much, Rachna Singh. I think there is just an amazing, once you've gone through some of those experiences yourself, and certainly in the world of politics, I'm sure that there are multi-layers of bias that you can speak to, and we'll be delving into that topic a little bit further. And I wanted to really just broach this topic as well too, with any of our panelists that may wish to sort of add to that. So what specific actions do you take to help break the bias that women face, including racialized women? So I'll ask if anybody wishes to. So Robin, I've seen you've unmuted yourself, and go ahead.
You know, I have always been very conscious of having a very strong network of women in various industries and supporting them and making sure that they all know each other so that they are all connected. But on top of that, I have a network of male friends who are respectful towards women. And I make sure that there's an intersection between those two networks so that we do break the bias and that they realize that there are women in different lines of business that they can be doing business with. And they're not just, you know, women who are meant to stay at home or anything like that. So I think that's the way to do it, is to, you've got to broach it both ways, with women and with men.
Great point, Robin. Again, I think that that's an incredibly a really important point to highlight as well too, is, and I quite often sort of say it in a slightly different way, and my team members will also recognize this as well too. It's great to preach to the choir, but the choir is already on your side. And so how do you actually reach across the aisle and bring people in? And so I think for meaningful change, that's such an incredibly important point that you've raised around ensuring that we're bringing in the men and bringing in the allies around sort of greater systemic change that's needed. Trish, I see you have unmuted yourself. Go ahead.
Thank you. And if you can allow me to first situate myself, because I think it is important that I do so. So I am joining you from the unceded territories of the Coquitlam Nation. But for me, my roots are from the Shona tribe of Zimbabwe, and I am from the Mija tribe, and also my totem is the eland antelope. And I am so honored to be in this lands and these lands until today, and for continuing to do so as well. Yeah, thank you to Parliamentary Secretary Singh, as well as Robin, for the points that you've already said. There is so much that we can do to break the bias. And for me, I'm gonna echo the fact that I use my privilege to do so, because every boardroom that you sit into, you can sit there and you can, if you just take an eagle eye view, you can see the opportunities that are there for us to amplify women's voices. And also, it's important for us to always pay attention to that intersectionality that's there. If we look at the data, because I'm glad that someone already mentioned that we need the data, because data is king. Data doesn't lie. Canada-wise, only 5.5% of BIPOC sit on boards, right? And in senior level positions. But of that, a fraction are women, right? So not only are we championing to have women be in leadership positions, but we need to dissect that and go down and say, okay, women, but which women? So we need to have the whole picture, and with data, we are able to look at it, and then we are able to then ask the right questions in the board to say which voices are missing. Who do we need here? And then for those of us that are sitting there, it is important to really amplify the voices of the ones sitting there, because if you've got one woman sitting there, they're not going to be heard. It takes 3 voices to sit in a place of power in order to be heard. So it's important for us when we get there, it's not 1 is not enough, 2 not enough, 3 is a minimum. So let's continue to amplify that. And I do use that voice, and I use my power to do so. The other thing too is the education, right? Let's continue to champion to have the funds so that we can have women catch up with the certifications. There are so many women that are willing to sit in these positions, but they can't, because you're told you're missing this one thing, right? And before, historically, we were not availed those opportunities. So now that they are there, I'm glad that we've got champions like Parliamentary Singh, that from the government level, they're saying, what can we do? How can we continue to amplify? So having more funds into it would really help. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Trish, for those very, very important perspectives. I think all of them are just incredibly key, and certainly your additional sort of sharing of a perspective of governance and in leadership circles, what that means, how much more our voices can be amplified in numbers, I think is such a critical awareness that I think more and more certainly corporate and other boards need to be aware of, that it's not merely okay to again engage with a tokenistic one female or one BIPOC individual on your board and say you're diverse. And so I think that's incredibly important for all of our folks that are joining here today to be able to hear that from someone who is deeply entrenched in this work. So thank you so much for your perspective. And Sobhana, over to you.
Thank you so much, Neelam. I could just listen to the 3 of them for the rest of the day. So honored to be here today. And for a moment, like Trish, I'd like to situate myself. So I was born in Malaysia, grew up in India. My parents are of South Asian heritage and immigrated to Canada in 1995. And I'm joining you today from the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples. In addition to what these 3 amazing women have just shared here, the 2 things that I just wanted to throw into the mix is, in terms of breaking the bias, I feel that there is a very big personal responsibility for each of us to take accountability and use our full potential to break the bias that surrounds us, that has surrounded us for generations. So there is a very personal agency kind of a lens that I like to apply to this. So whether it is, resisting the temptation to fall into societal narratives about how a woman should look or what the color of her hair should be, to once glass ceilings, like Rachna just said, there's so many glass ceilings to break. And with regards to breaking the bias, where I get most intrigued and concerned is what happens once we break those glass ceilings. Because people are so focused on getting the stats around how many people got included, whether it's in terms of hiring or putting folks on boards. Very little effort goes into finding out what happens once that happens. So once people are in organizations or once people are on boards, what really happens? Do they actually get included in decision making? Is their full potential being utilized? How are they able to impact and influence? So I think paying some attention to what happens once those glass ceilings are broken can help us get on a way where we can actually have a meaningful way of not just breaking the bias, but also sustaining it for generations to come.
Thank you so much, Shabna. That is such an incredible insight. As we're talking about any meaningful change, it's not meaningful if it can't be sustained. And so I think that's really, really important point that you've raised, and certainly one that we'll continue to delve into this conversation. So thank you so much to our panelists who, again, my error for not also having the opportunity to each of you make your own welcome as well too. Thank you for doing that as you made your points here today. We're going to move into a little bit more of a one-off type of questions that certainly that I'll ask to various one of you. If there are members in our audience that have specific questions or a certain add-on to a question that's been asked, please feel free to include that into your chat box. We'll be monitoring that and we'll be introducing that into the panel at some point in time as well too. So it is meant to be an interactive session. So I'll start off the next question specifically for Rachna, and that is, what do you think is the most significant barrier when it comes to women succeeding in the workplace and entering leadership roles?
Neelam, that's a really like specifying one thing that is stopping women. I would say it's the misogyny, the male chauvinism that we see around us, and not in every sphere. Like whether I can talk about my experience in politics, but I have done in my other roles also, and also if I want to say it from the positive side, the way how the things are changing, how women are making their way in the previously male dominated areas, I would say it is the close allyship. I would give it to that, we need close allies everywhere on the table. And a lot of times those are the women who have been there before us. But not a lot of times, and I know Robin also mentioned it, that you cannot do it without the close allyship of our male counterparts. They have to pave the way for us. And I personally, in my experience, like whatever I have been able to, all the barriers that I have been able to break, there have been very, very strong support, whether it is obviously starting from my home, from my father, from my husband, but even in the workplaces, that some people have paved the way. They have broken, like when I was fighting for getting that space for myself, there were people who were also fighting with me. It is, I won't say when we talk about the allyship, it is not that the woman does not have to do the fight. They do the fight, but somebody has to listen to that. And a lot of times those, the reason that women are not able to get those leadership roles is that when they are fighting, the people around on the table are not being the close allies, rather than they are just like shunning her off. So I think more allyship, more getting them on board, more education, more awareness, as we are doing, talking about the barriers that women are facing every day, every minute. Even like a lot of times when people say that you have reached a position of power or privilege, even in that position of privilege and power, you are facing misogyny, sexism at every point, and all of them can vouch for that. Like we are all privileged in some ways, but still in this time and age are facing barriers. I think, and we keep on pushing, and raising that voice. A lot of times, like you will speak once, and then because you're so tired of doing the fight, like you stop speaking up. I think that is very important, that even if you have achieved something, keep on speaking up, fighting for the women who are going to follow you.
Great, thank you so much for those points. Long fight, right? And I think that's why when we go back and reflect and say why hasn't there been larger leaps and bounds in the change? And I think it's important to recognize that this power dynamic, this framework that we work with in change is complex, it's multi-layered. And so I think it's incredibly important to understand that the complexity that you're working with, so you can achieve, as you've said, so much in within the realm that you're working with, but it doesn't necessarily translate to success on a larger scale, because you're looking at scales that are in many ways meant to hold you back. And so I think those are really, really important points that you raised. My next question is actually for Robin. There's no doubt that the pandemic has exacerbated barriers onto working women, but if we want to shift this, in what ways has our new normal now allowed for more opportunity and experience for women in the workplace?
That's a great question. And I actually had this conversation with the founder of the company that I work with. And she said, there's no longer shame in having children and being a working mother. The pandemic showed that you had to homeschool in some cases in this country, or you had to help your kid while you were trying to do your job. So I think people have a compassion for women who are working and are raising children at the same time. And I think that's the most amazing thing that has come out of this pandemic, that you can be honest about that. You didn't talk about your kids before. I remember being in offices where nobody mentioned their children, and now you can, and it's okay.
Great points there, Robin. I guess it's in our face. I mean, I think so many of us have witnessed absolutely, I want to say, adorable moments where our children have Zoom bombed our screens over this last 2 years, and it no longer has been something that you keep behind the curtain, so to speak. It's something that's come out into the open, and I think that there's an incredible amount of insight around how effectively, albeit difficultly, those areas of our lives are actually not dichotomous. They're not two ends of it. They're actually whole and one. And so I think that's really important. That's a great point that you've raised. Next one over here for Sobhana. And I believe women are the real architects. This is a quote by the way, from me. So I believe women are the real architects of society, and we are all on a journey to deconstruct societal norms of what a woman should be. What are your thoughts on that?
I have a lot of thoughts. I could get a PhD thesis done on that. I think, there's all kinds of architects, right? Some that are more overt and others, that sort of do their job behind the scenes and we never see them or hear them. The reason we are here on this panel today is because we are well connected. We have some kind of a presence, maybe on social media, or, we are out there doing work that gives us an opportunity to express ourselves. But we know that there are millions of women around the world who are just slogging away, building societies, overcoming barriers, raising families. We never see them or hear, about them. And I think for me, sort of, when I think about the narrative, one of the things that troubles me the most is how in the 21st century, we still have such a superficial narrative when it comes to what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a working woman, And there is still quite a bit of Eurocentrism around it. And, I've been to India recently, twice actually during the pandemic, to seek some alternate medical treatment. And what really continues to shock me every time I go back to India is how globalization, which has a lot of merits and a lot of plus points, how globalization is just eroding at the cultural elements of a beautiful country that is very complex, and how the young especially are really not analyzing, the mainstream narrative about what it means to be, a woman or a working woman or a career-oriented, a person. I think one of the reasons why this narrative doesn't get challenged or doesn't get broken down is because a lot of the times, and I'm saying this very generally, a lot of times when women manage to break those glass ceilings and they get into positions of power or influence, there is a lot of anxiety that if they don't assimilate and they don't look like, talk like, walk like the majority, then perhaps you would be seen as a misfit, in that space. And unconsciously or consciously, people then start focusing more on their survival, and their existence, instead of thinking about all the shoulders upon which we stood to get to where we are today, and the moral, ethical responsibility we have as mothers, women leaders, educated women, to make sure that we pave a long enough way for the next generation to walk on. So those are just some of my thoughts. I'd love to hear what others think about it.
Wow, I do want you to write a PhD on this now. I can listen to you forever for saying that. So I think maybe I will pause on this. I think our panelists, do you have anything to add?
She's bang on. And I think the other issue is that when you get into these executive boardrooms, there's only one woman sitting at the table, and the men actually make the women fight for that position when there should be more women sitting at that table. So I just wanted to add that to the earlier points that were made about that.
Great perspective there, Robin.
Yep, I can add a little bit as well. I had something to add when it came to the barriers that Rachna spoke of earlier. And if you look at the revolving door that's happening within the senior positions, because I'm in the recruitment space, so I see people that are going into senior levels and how quickly they are leaving, right? And it all comes down to what was spoken about earlier, to say, if the place is not inclusive enough, we could diversify as much as we want, but people are coming in and they're leaving as quickly as they're coming in, right? We need to make sure that there are supports in place for these people to get in and be able to really make the impact that they're going in there for. Otherwise, we are being performative, and performative is not going to get us anyway, right? And then when it comes to deconstructing the norm, the point that you spoke of earlier, I'm just going to share just a snippet of Maya Angelou's poem that I so love. She said, "Is the fire in my eyes, and the flash of my teeth, the swing in my waist, and the joy in my feet. I am a woman, phenomenal woman. That's me." We don't need to have them know us. We need to be able to get into a space where we can be ourselves, the phenomenal beings that we are. So they need to change, not us, right? So if we can all just continue to push forward to say, receive us for who we are, and receive us for the brains that we have and the change that we'll make when we get there, and we will have a phenomenal world.
And regardless of the titles we hold, whether they are formalized or not formalized. Absolutely, Trish, that was an extremely powerful point. Thank you so much. Again, the point around, it's not us that needs to continue to fight for that acceptance. We need society to step up bigger, and we need to ensure that there's also supports, as you noted as well too, that are critical for women that are making the inroads, to ensure that they're staying, that they're actually sticking to this, because again, sustainability being such a key factor of meaningful change, because you are right, in the absence of that, it is a one-time only, it's a flash in the pan, or again, it's performative.
No, and I really want to thank all my sisters, like great points, Sobhana, Trish, Robin, Neelam, you too. Very well said. Like a lot of times, like when people like us, like who look different and they take the stage, and it's a lot of times it is said that we are tokens. And So we have to make space for other women, that's for sure, or other women who might look different as well. But also to provide that support. I think that is extremely important, giving them, once they reach a position, with, as we talked before, about with close allyship and all their struggles that they have done, but how do they stay in that position? How do they feel supported? And this is what I've heard from a number of women, that, and especially in women in politics, they will take the plunge into politics, but then they don't want to run again because the system was not working for them. There were barriers at every stage, whether it was in the form of childcare, whether it was getting that space, getting their voices heard, that women, they will try it. A lot of times, like we know that women don't even try that field because it's very, still in this age and time, very unconventional area for women to venture into. But then even when they do, they don't want to stay in. So that support system is very much needed. Thank you for raising that.
Fantastic points, Rachna. So I'll ask one more question before we get over to the chat, and that's, let's talk about this glass ceiling. So we quite often talk about this, again, conventional language that's been used around gender parity, which is around glass ceiling. And that's just an assumption, a huge assumption made that the only direction is up. And I think one of the things that I like to talk about is the sticky floor. And so what is the sticky floor? What is the sticky floor that is, again, I think it's the assumption again, I want to go back to the whole concept of glass ceiling. Glass ceiling assumes everyone's on the level playing field, and we have this glass ceiling to crack through, to punch through. But we've never once looked at, or at least the traditional Western norms of gender parity have never looked at to say, actually, are we all on the same footing to begin from? And I think a huge answer to that, I think that we all know, is no. There is a sticky floor for some, and that sticky floor, for, I actually say for a lot, and that sticky floor is all the barriers that one has in order to even dream about a ceiling floor, a glass ceiling to punch through. So I think I want to talk about, maybe starting off with Trish on this one. What's your experience been with respect to government and business, Trish, when it comes to this glass ceiling and sticky floor phenomenon?
I love these phrases: glass ceiling, sticky floor, concrete ceiling, bamboo ceiling, right? We are just trying to find a word to describe, this phenomenon in this big cloud that's over us, right? One that I love that you didn't mention also is the glass cliff, right? Mm-hmm. So the way I look at it is, whichever word you give it, all we are wanting is to be given that opportunity to be ourselves and to aspire to be where we want to be. So when I look at that, glass ceiling, that ceiling, I set it myself, right? And everyone has to be able to say it for themselves. Not everybody wants to be in politics. Not everybody wants to be in senior level. They just want to do what they want to do and do it best and be supported where they're at, right? So when it comes to politics, that point exactly, why don't we put the things in place so that someone can look at it and say, I want to sit at this table. And for me to sit at this table, what has to be true for me to be there, right? And Rachna mentioned earlier childcare. If someone is a new mom, but they're passionate about governance and they want to sit in that political, whether it's local government, municipal, or federal, they just want to be able to be supported to be there, right? So we need to make sure like childcare is in place, the support system is in place, the hours are conducive, so that someone can be, doing the work that they love and be able to also be a mom or, be a family person if they so choose to, right? So I think I probably went away from your point because I was so excited about all these words. But what was your main question, if I can ask again?
No worries. I think everything that you've mentioned, Trish, has been so relevant. I said, when we were talking about the glass ceiling and the sticky floor for some, what's been your experience with respect to government and business? What that looks, what does that glass ceiling and sticky floor experience look like for you?
Yeah, so I am fortunate enough to where the floor cannot be sticky enough to keep me down. I keep jumping, right? And I encourage everybody to do the same, to say, a lot of times we're going against the wind, or we are flowing, we are swimming against the tide, right? So for me, I've been lucky to where I can swim harder and I can get there, but it's not the case for everybody. And when it comes to politics, I am also so thankful. And this is a story that I want to tell, that it's not all bad. You hear so many stories out there, and I think we share the stories that are the worst, and then people then get scared to get in. But I think Rajna shared the same thing, that her journey she has had a lot of support. Mine as well. I've had so much support, and I am like championing to say, if you want to get into local government, if you want to get hold of me, please call me, and I will mentor you, and I will tell you the recipe that I used, so that you as well can get there, because I think that's what we need to do. Yeah, but my journey has been beautiful.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that, Trish. Actually, maybe I'll lean on Robin, again, your experience with respect to the glass ceiling and the sticky floor with respect to media and marketing, because again, we know that that's traditionally been quite a male-dominated industry, and there's certainly the inherent challenges in that industry as well too.
So my previous career as a journalist, it was definitely very male-centric. I would be in meetings, and if I would make a suggestion, and I'd be shot down. But if a male made the same suggestion, it was like, oh, we better write this down and we better do this. So that was my experience there. And I always found that it was the boys' club, and they were all friends, and they promoted each other. And some of them weren't even qualified to be promoted, and they'd get promoted because, they all wanted to play golf together. It's like they didn't have enough golf buddies, for goodness sake. And so that really weighed on me. And I was on the diversity committee for many, many years for our company at the time. And I was always promoting women. I was always trying to, push women forward. And, you see at the executive leadership, there was one woman who was at that board table, and she was in human resources. And you're telling me that there wasn't another role that another woman could have filled? I saw a reporter go and become a vice president like this. How did a reporter become a vice president a day? Probably wasn't qualified at the time. So you're saying that, oh, there wasn't a female reporter who could become a vice president at the time? I mean, these were the things that were happening. So when I went over to Talk Shop Media, one of the things that drew me to it was that the boardroom is full of women. And they're all very different. They all complement each other. They're all smart and strong, and they're so, so supportive. And it was one of the reasons that I moved over there.
Thank you so much, Robin, for sharing that perspective. And I think what you've shared certainly around your time as a reporter likely resonates for a lot of our attendees here today that might have been in similar type of industries where, again, there has not traditionally been a deep-seated desire by those that are in power to encourage pathways to leadership for women. And I think that that's certainly a story that unfortunately still resonates true today in a wide range of industries, not just media and marketing. Over to you, Sobhana, around your experiences around glass ceiling and sticky floor with respect to academia, the big world of academia.
Yeah, thank you. I love the terms myself. So I'm not an academic. I'm on the senior administration side of things at SFU. And so I'm into partnership building and community engagement, government relations, that kind of work. So I'm not wanting to speak specifically for SFU, but generally speaking in the post-secondary space, whether it's here or overseas, what you see is there is a lot of women, in academia, and there's a lot of women, even in senior leadership, in Canada, and for that matter, even places like, Asia. I think where the stickiness and the glass ceiling concepts, I want to just sort of unpack it a little bit, is if you take the Canadian context, whether it's post-secondary or in any other sector, one of the challenges I think we have in terms of supporting people to get into positions of leadership and then have a meaningful role in that institution is a great deal of what I call plain ignorance. And what I mean by that is a lot of people who are in positions of power, whether it's in the HR department or in other areas, may not have had enough of exposure to the global context, may not have traveled, enough, or may not realize that a lot of the skills are actually transferable, or not having a particular skill or qualifications that's on a job description is actually not a bad thing, because the person brings in something that is quite invaluable. But unless you have a frame of reference, right, it's very difficult to make sense of what's in front of you. So on one hand, institutions will say, we want, for example, people of minority groups and Indigenous peoples to apply for these jobs. But the job description, the interview process, the selection process, they're all very Eurocentric, right? So one example is, if you look at BC government, they've done a fantastic job where for the behavioral competencies, which is used to do interviews, they also have Indigenous competencies. And so if you are doing an interview process, you've got to marry the two. But we don't necessarily see that all over, right? The other thing with the academia, the only thing that I want to just touch on, because I have taught a course or two here and there in child welfare and other areas. One of the interesting things is that the curriculum is a product of colonization, right? I know this is a very general statement, but let me unpack it for a second. Though we are making efforts to decolonize teaching or indigenize curriculum for most part in Western universities, in Western post-secondary institutions, is quite colonial in nature. And we are moving in the right direction, but very slowly, right? Because you're looking at undoing years of harm, right? And so if you look at the TRC report, you see what negative impacts education had, on Indigenous communities and Indigenous rights. So I think one of the things I just want to throw out there is that if the folks who are responsible for hiring, folks who are responsible for curriculum, are able to just open up and by default be more inclusive and more global in their perspective, I think these spaces, including post-secondary institutions, would be able to fast forward reconciliation, inclusion, and all of those things probably much faster than we've been able to do so far.
Great points, Sobhana. Very, 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 very valid points. I think there's, again, all of this work is incredibly complex. I mean, let's just face it, if there were easy answers, I think we would have been further along the progression around gender parity. One of the questions, I'll take a question again, a really great question that's just recently come in through the chat box, and that is, should we start as mothers around raising our sons differently? We will accept boys will be boys rules. We have to change it now to see effect 30 years from now. And I guess I open the floor to any of our panelists to be able to, if they would like to make a comment on that particular notion around starting around changing the viewpoints around how we change viewpoints around with boys.
I can jump in first.
Sure.
So we started the first question talking about bias, right? Yeah. And biases, on the most part, are learned from the environments that we grow in, right? So how we are raising the sons is going to form them in the biases that they're going to have 20, 30 years from now. So in also, we were just talking about the inclusion part a while ago. Even the definition of inclusion, if you were to go in this room and ask everybody, what is inclusion to you? Or even what is diversity for you? Every single person will have a different answer, right? So if we start by educating our kids, not only boys, even girls, educating them so that we can all have shared definitions, so we can have shared vision of what an Ubuntu society, an inclusive society looks like, I think we have a beautiful future. So yes, I do agree that we need to start by just educating them and just infusing them with that positive and good outlook of the world.
Excellent point. Rachna, over to you.
Yeah, no, I'll jump in too. And being mother to a young adult, it is, I think that's a very, very important point. And what are we showing them? Like, how we are behaving in our own homes, like not practicing what we are preaching, I think is extremely important. And in my case, I think I've been very privileged to have very, very strong men in my life who have been extremely supportive. And my son watches that and sees that the strength that his mom has got, like a lot of how his father and his grandfather have supported his mom to be in the position that she's in. And a lot of times I don't even have to do much teaching to him because he's seen it and he realizes it. Like a lot of conversations we have every day. I hear it from his voice that how important it is to give the respect, to make that space for women. And I'm really hoping that when he chooses his life partner and in his work life also, that he sets that example as well. So maybe in 5 years, Neelam, I can come back again and tell you how that has been. So, but for now, really good.
Well, I think you made such an important point there, Rachna. I think when you said I didn't have to share so much around it, I think that's a critical piece to actually note that you didn't have to introduce unlearning because the environment he was raised in was the norm. Like it was normal to see that. So you're not unlearning a lot of the biases that are inherent that's actually happening, as Trish has mentioned, in the formative years in the environment that you see. It's not actually a direct teaching that actually happens. It's that through symbiosis, it's through actually just being in the environment that a lot of these sort of formative pieces of what are gender roles, what are power dynamics that are normal for people or normal for between the two genders actually just happens. And what an amazing world we would have if we actually started that platform in a very neutral manner, in a manner that actually is going to serve in the future in a way that is going to be, you know, seeing men as women, men and women as equals, but also as in, hey, anything can go. It's you are not actually defined in through your roles individually like this. And so I think that's such a critical piece. And I think that's, maybe you may not have even realized it yourself, but I think it's critical to actually say, you didn't have to go through the unlearning.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, I see that.
Shabna, over to you.
Yeah. Oh, I resonate so much with what Rachna has been saying here in terms of, for me too, I wouldn't be here today if not for my father. You know, both my parents played a very big role in shaping my personality and my life. But when I look back, I think language is something my father got right. He never once said, even girls can do this, or let me teach you to do this, you know. It was always a very equal playing field for me, my sister, and my brother. And he would just say, hey, there's a snake in the yard, you know, it's poisonous. Come with me, we need to kill it. Or, you know, it was never like, are you afraid of snakes? You know, do you mind coming and supporting me? No, it was a very interesting way how he spoke, always as an equal. And my brother and I and my sister were treated like equals. And so I grew up with the perception that, you know, we can all do what we want to do. I have two young sons, they're 21 and 24. And like Rachna, you know, they have all their life seen a mother who's A, strong, but B, supported by males in the family, by bosses, you know, who are males, or colleagues who are males, or friends who are males. And so they have just shown up in this world in a way where they just believe that, you know, we all have equal rights and they too have to do their fair share. So it was never an option for my boys not to learn to cook, not to learn to bake, or not to learn to clean the house. It was a given that they've got to pitch in and do it too. So I think in the language we use and the expectations we convey to our children, you know, is very, very powerful, because words are loaded with all kinds of connotations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Language matters. Your words matter. And sometimes even when they're done off the cuff, quite actually often off the cuff words are the ones that are actually have the most long lasting impact. And so I think that's so incredibly important, you know, to talk about. I think one of the things that I want to segue into is what so many women still grapple with, myself included at times. And that is imposter syndrome. So do you feel imposter syndrome even as a leader? If so, how do you deal with it? How have you built confidence over the course of your career? I'm going to start this conversation off with Trish first and ask her to maybe make a comment on that.
Yes. So I remember watching one of the CNN reporters who has been in the media for so many years, and she came up, that was about 4 years ago, and she shared how she had really been crippled with imposter syndrome. And I watched in shock. And I'm going, there she was day in and day out, getting on TV and sharing around the world and really being impactful. And yet she was struggling with imposter syndrome. And it was real for me when I saw that. And I hear that a lot with women that I work with, to say, they feel like they don't belong there. I am privileged in the sense that my father was the same. I'm one of 7 girls. I don't know how it is to have brothers. I don't know how it is to have a son, because I have a daughter. So, my world, the only men in my world has been my husband and my father, right? And both of them are very, very good in the sense that they never use any other words, even for my daughter, right? So imposter syndrome is not something that I struggle with, because I was told from an early age that I could be whoever I wanted to be, and I could step into whichever stage that I want to get onto. In fact, my father told me when I was young, she said, anywhere you go, you are the queen. So I literally walk into a room and I say to myself, Queen Trish is walking in. And I find that really helps me not have that imposter syndrome, because I'm already stepping in saying, I belong here, right? So given that it's not my problem, for those that struggle with it, my message would be to say that, your voice is so unique and it's so specific to you that it's needed there. So if you step into a space knowing that what you have is unique and nobody else has it, you are never going to question yourself whether you belong there or not. Automatically, you know that you need to be there. So I would say stop by the door and just say, what is it that I'm feeling right now, and acknowledge it, and then step in.
Excellent points, Trish. Absolutely. And I think it's just so important to center oneself. I know we always talk about decentering oneself, but in the case of imposter syndrome, is centering yourself to say, I actually have something valuable to add. My skills, our perspectives are unique. They're unique to me. I need to ensure that I'm using this space to actually share those perspectives. But I tell you that imposter monster is real. And I know that there's quite a few comments around it that I certainly hear within my networks all the time too. It is really easy to fall into its traps, that's for sure. Any of our panelists that wish to comment on imposter syndrome, how you deal with it and how you've built confidence over the course of your career? Because I think there's our community teams here are really wanting to hear about that. Sobhana, you've unmuted yourself.
It's such a complex, complex reality. And I think every single person, if they choose to be honest, will say, yes, I faced it and I struggled with it from time to time. I think when I look back sort of at the 30 years of my adult, career, definitely there have been moments where, I have had to come to terms with it. But what I've done over the last little while is to spend less time questioning whether I belong somewhere and focusing more on doing something about it. So a lot of the times we underestimate our power and our potential, right? We are more than being, say, a mother or a partner or working in an institution or volunteering somewhere. We are a sum total of all of that. So one of the things I've consciously done over the last 5 years, especially, is when my kids grew up and they're in university, is really making spaces and finding spaces for me to get involved in doing things that are meaningful. Both at the institution I work in and I have a day job, in my pro bono work, as a mentor to, say, young professionals or young entrepreneurs, instead of waiting for someone to open the door, to really believe I have the power to find these doors and open them for myself. And that has really, really helped. But the one thing, if I may be very candid, Neelam, the one thing I do struggle with from time to time is you know, we are inundated with injustices all around us every single day, but we don't always speak up or choose to speak up. One, because we just think that our voice is of no use in that space, but we could also be, you know, afraid of consequences or just be overwhelmed by what's happening all around us, right? So the choice to sometimes not say something is, I think, one of my biggest struggles. And, you know, it's something that I need to probably spend more time unpacking from time to time.
Absolutely, Sobhana. That was a really, really pertinent point. And I think as leaders, we struggle with, because we wait on that cusp of not saying anything or waiting to formulate the right response or not knowing how to. Sometimes our silence is the loudest message we can send out. And it's things that are quite, it's scary. It's scary for leaders. Again, we're in a world, and certainly Robin can speak to this, that again, when there's a lot of, we're very exposed. There's a lot of exposure. So people are watching to what you say, but also to what you're not saying. And I think it's such an incredible balance that needs to be struck. And I think that's something that, you know, I continue to struggle with as well, too, given, you know, the complexity of the work we do and the complexity of the different lives that it touches and the potential for harm and the potential for narratives to be spun out of control. And so I think, you know, on that, I see Robin has herself unmuted. And so Robin, perhaps you can lend your voice to this.
I just wanted to add some levity, actually. I was on a panel a few years ago with some very senior people in finance. I mean, people I like, I worship, I respect them, and they're amazing. And one woman was asked that very question: do you think that you have imposter syndrome? And she goes, I am winging it every day, because you don't know what's going to be thrown at you and what skill you have at the back of your head or in your Rolodex, or a contact you have in your Rolodex, but you're really winging it every day, and that it's okay that you are. So I just want to add that.
Excellent point. Thank you so much for that. I love that. I think we all need that little, I don't know, a little sticker or something in front of us saying, win that imposter syndrome war each and every day, in what way that resonates for you. I think we'll take a bit of a round robin of this, and it's advice. It's what advice would you give to emerging female leaders? We'll start off with you first, Rachna. What advice would you give to emerging female leaders?
I would just say, believe in yourself. And this is what, when I look back at my life, where I have been able to, what I have been able to achieve, it is like the belief. We have talked about the imposter syndrome and everything. Like a lot of times we doubt our skills and our positions, but in your heart, you know what you are doing is right. And it is not, Trish mentioned it before, not all of us want to be politicians. Not all of us want to be the leaders or the journalists, as a wonderful journalist that we have here, Robin, or a CEO of a very important organization, or a VP of a post-secondary institution. So, but like whatever you are doing in your role, even if it is, and I say this to women whenever I see them, even if you want to be a homemaker, if this is what you want to do, and that's where your heart is, and you feel empowered by that, do it. Just don't get into this rush or into this, especially in the world that we are living in, the competitiveness that we see around us, the expectations and the Eurocentric expectations that are put on us. It is very important. Believe in yourself, do the things that you really want to do. And if you want to be a politician, you want to be MLA, MP, or tomorrow a premier or a prime minister, go for it. And I always feel that you will take one step. There would be some tough choices, some struggles, a lot of misogyny, a lot of sexism, no question about it. But if you are sure about it, somehow nature paves the way. And whether it is in the form of close allies or supporters, but then you reach where you want to reach. So believe in yourself, friends.
Thank you so much for that, Rachna. Those are wise words. We'll move it over to Trish next to comment on that. So what advice would you give to emerging female leaders?
Yeah, for sure. The first thing is confidence. You got to have that as you're getting out of the gate, right? But the most important thing is don't let somebody else's story be your story. I think with social media now, people get on there and they see the stories that are unfolding for other people, and they grab those stories and they make them their stories. By doing so, we actually close the doors before we even get on to knock on the door. So write your own story, put your own goals, don't compare yourself with anybody else but yourself, right? Because I find when you compare yourself or when you take other people's stories, then you've already put the barriers that might not even be there. Some of them, might be barriers that you can walk over easily, but because you already have this perception that it's going to be hard, you stop before you start. So set your goals and go for it. But most importantly, don't do it alone. Get a sponsor. A lot of the people right now say, I'm going to get a mentor. A mentor is great. A mentor is great, but what you need is a sponsor, because that sponsor is going to be there when you're not there. They're going to be your champions in the boardroom, in whatever position they're at. They're going to know what your goals are, and they're going to be your champions. So don't go at it alone. That's all.
Thank you. Amazing words, Trish. Like, again, I see Robin really resonating with her head nod there around sponsors. So Robin, your words of advice to emerging female leaders.
You know what, the best leader is the one who's still working in the trenches right beside you, not hiding in a corner office, not, sending memos out, because when you're sitting there with your other colleagues, they're your colleagues. Remember that they're not your minions, they're your colleagues. And then you can figure out who the next leader is going to be by sitting right beside them. You're not going to find them in an office and then go, oh my God, we got to fill this job. Oh my God, we need a female in this role. Well, why don't you see the ones that are actually right in front of you? Because they're right there.
Well said. That's amazing. Excellent words. Thank you. Again, sometimes our answers are in front of us if we choose to look. Thank you. Sobhana, over to you.
Wow, lots of great pieces of advice here. I mean, I'm one of those people. I think I have so much to learn, and every single day you learn from all kinds of individuals, especially the ones around you and within your family and within your workspace. The couple of things I just want to throw out there is that I am of the opinion that we cannot go very far in our lives if we are not anchored. And we've got to each figure out a way to be anchored, to learn to manage our demons, to learn to be calm and thoughtful and deliberate about how we go about our life. That is a personal responsibility. Finding time to do whatever it takes to anchor you is really critical. Secondly, many of us are privileged to have these opportunities we have. We don't have to be perfect. We don't need to be at the top of an organization. Irrespective of the positions we are in, there are hundreds of people who would benefit from a little bit of time, a coffee chat. Be generous, give back all the time. Don't wait to get to the top of an organization to give back. Last but not the least, I think one of the things that each of us can do to be sane and to be successful is define what success means to us. So for me right now, being successful means keeping at the top of all the changes that's happening globally and being a lifelong learner. Disruptive technologies, for instance, is disrupting our lives in a big way. It is not my organization's responsibility. It is not my family's responsibility to teach me about disruptive technologies, right? It is my responsibility to understand how these things are taking over my life and taking over the world, right? So I think I put a lot of onus on the person, but at the same time, we are privileged, and the more we give back, the better I think the world will be.
Amazing, amazing words of wisdom. Thank you so much, Sobhana. Those are such relevant points, such amazing points that resonate, I think, with myself and so deeply, and certainly with others, with the amount of heart emojis we're seeing popping across the screen here. I would now like to ask Annie Sun from our Diversity's marketing team to walk us through just a brief little exercise from here before we move into our closing remarks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're having such inspiring conversations here, but I would just like to pause for a little moment and have us all come together for a little group activity where we come up to our cameras and cross our arms to strike the International Women's Day pose to just sort of show that we're committed to, breaking the bias, and it'll be a great opportunity for us to show this on our social media and just to amplify this voice that we've created so far. So if we could get everyone to come up right now and cross our arms, and I think this would be a great photo opportunity right now. And all right, thank you so much, everyone. That was an amazing photo. And now I'll pass it on to Neelam to conclude the event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Annie, for leading us through this exercise, and to all of our guests here that have joined us here today. That was I think, just an amazing visual to see. And what a great conversations we've had today. I really, really want to have the opportunity to thank each and one of these amazing women. And I was sharing with them before we joined this group. Each of them have left such an incredible mark on myself through different interactions, whether they've been close or whether they've been afar. And I think that that's something that as each of us sort of parts through this conversation today is every interaction matters. Every interaction is a continuity of a cause and effect of a larger ecosystem. And if there's anything we walked away from today, is to say that this work that we do around breaking the bias, around gender equality and gender parity cannot be done alone. It cannot be done singularly. It must be done in conjunction with allies, with supporters. And those are supporters that are sitting next to us, are possibly in positions that we may aspire to be in, and maybe in positions that we have left behind, or may not be in formal positions, but have left huge marks in our hearts and our mind. And so I wanted to thank each and every one of our panelists for sharing their wise words of wisdom here today. I know that there's incredible insights that we'll capture through with additional media post this session. I would now like to turn the floor to my dear friend, though, MLA Rachna Singh, who has been our event partner and has been such an incredible ally to myself personally, to say a few closing remarks and goodbyes.
Thank you so much, Neelam. What a pleasure. And I wish we could have done this in person and hopefully very soon. But Neelam, I cannot thank you enough, and Diversity, for organizing this and co-hosting with us, with our office. And it was just wonderful, the conversations that we've had, how to break the barriers, how to be strong allies, things that we are doing every day, the glass ceilings that we are breaking. And so looking forward to many such conversations. And I think International Women's Day is not the only day when we talk about this. It is one day designated for that, but we need to do this. We need to be talking about this, about the barriers that women are facing, how to break those barriers, and in our capacity. And I talk about the capacity that I have as a person, a person who has a position of privilege, to commit to this, to break that in my capacity, I will be breaking the bias. So, but amazing conversation. So good to see so many good friends today, and especially to all the panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, for everyone's meaningful conversations and great commentary throughout this entire event, and wishing you all a wonderful rest of your day and a happy International Women's Day to everybody.